Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Smell Podcast. I'm your host, Katie Boateng. Happy 2-year podcast anniversary to all of you. I am so excited and thrilled that it's already been 2 years since I started the show. For this special podcast episode, I wanted to share my own story with you all. I've had people reach out on social media to ask me about my own story, and I'm happy to be able to share. I posted on social media a while ago to ask if anyone had questions for me, and I'll be addressing those questions on the show today. I'm also very excited because previous podcast guest, Carrie Wall, is my interviewer. Carrie shared her own anosmia story with all of us back on episode 47 from October of 2019. All right, let's jump in and listen to this very special 2-year anniversary episode where you all get to hear my own story. Here we go. Hello, everyone, and welcome to a special 2-year anniversary edition of the Smell Podcast. I have with me today a special guest who's previously been on the podcast before, Carrie Wall. Carrie, do you want to say hello to everybody?
Hi, everyone. I'm so glad to be back with you today, Katie.
Yeah, so Carrie was episode 47. So if you guys haven't listened to that episode, you'll want to go back and re-listen to the episode. But for today, it's actually the 2-year anniversary of the Smell Podcast, which is pretty fantastic. So I asked Carrie if she would be willing to come back on and do this special episode where she asks me the questions that I normally ask all of you. So that's kind of what we're going to do. And then also towards the end, I posted on social media, kind of ask me anything to see if listeners had some questions that they wanted me to ask. And I have a few of those that I'll be responding to as well. So I guess we'll go ahead and we'll get started. And instead of me doing the interviewing, it's going to be Carrie. So Carrie, if you want to go ahead and take it away.
I will. This is very fun, Katie. I know I was very interested when I started listening to the podcast to know more about your story. And the more you interviewed all of the folks with olfactory disorders, the more I thought, well, what's Katie? What's going on with Katie? So now it's the time.
Right. That's awesome.
Number one, please tell us about yourself. Where are you from and where do you live now?
All right, so my name is Katie Boateng, and as you guys all know, I'm the host of the Smell Podcast. I'm originally from a small town in Idaho, which is called Mountain Home. The name is actually quite misleading because it's a desert. You would think that it's in a mountainous area, but it's in a flat area of Idaho, southern Idaho. My family is actually military, but unlike most military families, we didn't actually go anywhere. We stayed mostly in that one town growing up. So I grew up there, went to college, met my husband, got married, and then I currently live in New Jersey with my husband, whose name is Steven, and we moved here in 2018. I actually work in higher education in an admissions office, and I've been involved in the admissions world since 2014 after I graduated from college. I actually taught high school Spanish for a year after I graduated college and then moved into admissions. So that's kind of a fun fact about me. I actually have a degree in Spanish education for high school.
Neat.
Yeah. So currently my job consists of recruiting students to attend our university, and I've been doing that for a long time. When I'm not working, I really like to read. I like to watch TV shows, and lately I've been watching 90 Day Fiancé and Schitt's Creek. Those are some of my favorites.
Yeah.
I also like to jog, and I like to do yoga at times, and I'm always listening to some kind of audiobook or podcast. Currently, my newest podcast adventure is something called Bananas, which is just like funny, crazy news stories, and it's just been making me really happy. And I'm currently listening to a book called Force of Nature by Jane Harper. It's an Australian series that was recommended to me by my best friend's husband. So that's just a little bit about me.
You've got a lot going on. You have a multifaceted life.
Yeah, definitely.
You didn't touch on starting the Smell podcast or what led you to that, but maybe that's more going to be part of the next question. I'm not sure. I think people might be curious to hear that part.
It is. Yep, it'll be part of the next question for sure.
Okay. So the next question is, tell us your anosmia story, please, in as many words as you like.
Yeah. So my anosmia story started in late 2008, early 2009. So I graduated high school in 2008 and started college later that year. So that winter, I got really sick with an upper respiratory infection, and it was like late winter 2008, early winter 2009. So I'm not exactly sure when. But basically, I've shared this story before that I was in college during that time. I actually lived in an apartment with 5 other women, and there was a definite moment one day where I was up for class and I was eating breakfast at our kitchen table, like our communal kitchen table. One of the girls, one of my roommates, was cleaning the table while I was having my cereal. And I just remember at that moment being like really irritated and annoyed that she would be spraying bleach cleaning spray while I was sitting there.
Mm-hmm.
And then I thought to myself during that moment, though, like, wait a second, I can't smell that. And that's how my story started. So I was irritated just like automatically, but it wasn't actually because the smell was bugging me. And it's the first moment that I realized that I couldn't actually smell the spray.
Wow.
Yeah. So after that, I sought help from my family physician, like back in my hometown. And he prescribed me nasal steroids, like just this, everybody gets those, I think, when they start on their anosmia journey, if they're an acquired anosmic. When that didn't solve the problem, he referred me on to an ear, nose, and throat doctor. And that person examined me with like the nose microscope. They look up your nose and check for everything. Ordered a CT and an MRI both to rule out like any nasal polyps or tumors that could be
Mm-hmm.
causing the issue. And those came back clear as well. So after they came back clear, he actually referred me to a neurologist next who checked for any kind of brain related issues. The neurologist also didn't find anything wrong with me, and that was kind of that. So I was left to kind of figure it out, what my new reality was. And looking back, I can see that that was a very difficult time for me. This was 2009, like I mentioned, so there were no support services available. I don't think that I heard the word anosmia once. Maybe the ENT mentioned it like offhandedly.
Mm-hmm.
So after I was kind of left to myself, I honestly just ignored having anosmia for like a solid 7 to 8 years because it was too painful for me to look at. So then this kind of gets into how the podcast started. So when we moved to New Jersey in 2018, I was looking for a job, so I had more time on my hands and I was home. So I decided to start the Smell podcast because I like listening to podcasts and I wanted to create something for people that would have been useful to me back in 2009. And I just kind of started. I didn't know what I was doing, but I just kind of connected with people online on social media and asked if they wanted to be interviewed and got better at recording and producing the audio and putting it out on social media and all that stuff. So it's kind of just grown from there. So since then, I've just been making episodes where I interview other people who have smell disorders. I also share like smell related news and I talk with scientists about their different areas of expertise. And it's really been my favorite thing to do since I got started. Um,
Wow.
yeah. And then lastly, I wanted to share with everyone that kind of the next chapter, I think, of my anosmia journey is that I'm currently working on forming the first smell and taste disorder patient association in the United States
Wow.
because, yeah, because one doesn't currently exist yet. So I want to change that. And when I have more news on that, I will definitely share with everyone so that they can learn more about it and get involved if they would like to.
Because on your podcast, I've definitely heard others talk about patient organizations in other places in the world,
Right.
and it seems to make a big difference.
And there's
Uh,
not one in the United States yet.
It's needed.
It definitely is. So another thing that I always, I don't know, it's cheesy or corny, but like one thing that I typically ask myself is why not me? So that's kind of how I motivate myself to do things. Like there's not a podcast yet about smell disorders, so why not me? There's not a patient association for these people, for people like myself yet, so why not me? So that's kind of my motivating factors. Like I can be the person who can do it, so I will.
It's a leadership mentality. You look around, you're like, well, shouldn't someone do this? I guess I will.
Exactly. Yeah. So
Kind of
we've
like you
had
looked
a
around and, oh, go ahead, please.
Oh, I was just going to share. So we've had a few meetings. We're kind of working on what our mission, vision, values, things will be, and then once we come to a consensus on all of that information, we'll kind of go from there and post it online and get going.
This is really exciting.
Thank you. I think so too.
Because just like the Smell podcast, starting that, you are actively being the change that you want to see in the world, or that you wanted to see in the world. Like, this is the podcast I wish I could have had access to when I first became anosmic. And I know
Yeah.
it's made that difference for myself, and I'm sure for many others. This is very inspiring, Katie.
Thank you. Well, I remember when you and I talked on your episode, you had shared to me like how you found the podcast on social media using hashtags, and then you found the Facebook groups, and then you found Absent. And
Yep.
that's, to me, that is like, I don't even know how to express like how meaningful that is to me. Like, just to be a resource for people who need it, because that would have been what I needed in 2009. And it's like the best, most happy feeling when you share that. And I have people who reach out to me on the social media platforms. And just like today, this morning, I woke up to a message from someone. I've never met this person before on the Smell Podcast Instagram, who just said like, "Hi, how are you? I need help. I have anosmia." And it's like, I can help, or I can find you help.
Yeah,
If
you
I,
can.
so that's just really, I guess it's my passion.
Clearly it is. It's very meaningful. And it was really interesting to hear you say, and it's my favorite thing to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. It is.
Back to some of the regular questions. And I know one thing I really love is the format of your interviews with your guests, is you ask many of the same questions. And I find it allows us to compare our experience with others.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, this is true for me, but not for them. And look how they are experiencing it. And I like that. So
Me too.
back to that regular format. Do you think being anosmic impacts your relationship with food and eating?
I definitely do. I would say 100%. I
Mm,
don't really enjoy eating like I did before I had anosmia. And I eat food because it's necessary. And I crave things that are salty or sweet compared to more healthy foods, I think. But I think that I crave those types of foods specifically because they stand out more to my taste buds.
mm.
So if I'm able to perceive them, I think I'm able to perceive like maybe those salty, sweet, fatty foods better than maybe more nuanced foods that don't have like strong tastes. And if I had my way, I would eat chips and crackers 24/7 because I really like things that are crunchy.
Right.
I'm not a big fan of bland foods or things that are like more smushy texture wise, like plain yogurt or overly ripe bananas are really just disgusting to me. I've had fish. My husband and our roommates really enjoy eating different types of fish, and typically it's good. But I had some a while ago that was just so gross to me because it wasn't like spiced in a way that I could enjoy it, and the
Right.
texture was just like bleh. So I go for things that stand out like texturally to me in terms of food. So yeah, that's definitely something that has been different because beforehand I would enjoy cooking, and now I don't really enjoy it, but I do it because it's required, I guess. You have to eat.
Right. And related to this food and eating topic, so many people talk about how those are social activities.
Mm-hmm.
When you said your husband and your roommates and many get-togethers happen over food, do you find that those social relationships around food have shifted, or how does that part go in your life?
No, I don't. For me personally, I don't think so because I'll still go and like hang out and enjoy it. I think it's more the food is not my focus anymore, right? So I'll go because I want to be with everyone and I want to enjoy our time together. But like I still enjoy eating. I don't know how to explain that part. It's just, it's not like the focus. It's not like I'm going to make this fantastic meal today and like really enjoy it. It's more of like, let's make this cool meal together and hang out. And that to me is enjoyable. Like the food is an afterthought.
That's totally my experience as well. It's not about the food.
Right. I like,
Yeah.
I like the camaraderie and the quality time, I guess, of cooking.
Mm-hmm.
Because Stephen and we cook typically on the weekends for the coming week, and we'll make like similar dishes each weekend, like certain foods, and then we have them ready to go. And it's definitely the time spent together and like doing it, or the act of like, I know that he enjoys the food, so if I'm cooking it for him, like that part makes me happy. But again, like the food itself doesn't really matter.
Yes, I can definitely relate.
Yeah.
When smell comes up in daily life, do you take the time to explain to people that you can't smell?
I typically don't do that if it's a stranger or if it's someone that I won't see again, because it takes too much time and energy to explain, or it might not be like socially appropriate in that moment to explain it to someone. I think I used to more often, like when anosmia was fresh to me, even if it was like a stranger, I would say like, oh, I don't have a sense of smell. But over time, I think that's changed for me, and now I typically won't. However, if it's like a colleague, a friend, or a family member, I will always remind them that I can't smell. And there's people in my daily life who still forget, and then they'll apologize right away. But to me, anosmia is not common, so I understand, and I always appreciate it when they do remember it. And I think that it's second nature to everyone to ask someone else, like, "Hey, does this smell?" So it's not offensive to me if they forget, but I do remind them.
When you said it takes too much time to explain to strangers, have you had the experience where folks are sort of incredulous or don't believe you, or they're suddenly super curious about your condition, and that's what takes so long?
I think maybe it depends on how I'm doing that day. So like if I'm like have a lot of like mental energy or mental capacity, then I'll go into it. But like if I'm like in a hurry or something like that, then yeah, I typically just won't get into it, because yeah, most people will say like, either my experiences have been, one, they ignore you and move on, or two, they don't believe you and then try to prove to you why you're wrong.
Right.
Or how that can't be accurate. And both are like, I think at this point, I'd almost just that they just kind of gloss over it and we move on. I don't like when people say like, you mean you can't smell dog poop, you can't smell gasoline, you can't smell like all these different things. I don't appreciate those conversations, and I think that's what can be a little bit tiring.
Yeah, and that, to me, that leads right into the next question, because the question is, do you self-identify as having a disability? And it reminds me of this idea that disabilities are often dismissed or ignored or not paid due respect. So how do you identify in terms of a disability?
Yeah, and this is actually my favorite question to ask everyone, because it's so there's so many different answers. So for myself, I do. At this point, I do think it is a disability. I didn't used to, because when you think about the word disability, typically, like at least in my experience, how I was raised, it comes with like a negative connotation, like that there's something wrong with you, or that you can't, or that you're less than. And that's not true, right? So you can't tell that there's anything wrong with me by looking at me. So it's definitely an invisible disability, but it is one, because I think that even the definition of a disability is something that is an impairment that significantly impacts your daily function, right? And so I don't have a sense of smell. Yeah. But I did find recently on Twitter, there's actually this account called the Invisible Disabilities Association. And I don't know a lot about them yet. I just recently found them like within the last 2 weeks. So I'm excited to learn more about their platform. But that to me is a cool resource to share with everyone if you're also interested to learn more. It's just the Invisible Disabilities Association. I believe that the gentleman who started it, his wife was impacted by some kind of invisible disability, and he started it because he was frustrated that people didn't think that she was disabled, or didn't think that she was as impacted by it as she was. So I'm interested to learn more about it. Another article, and I think I actually shared this with you also via Instagram recently, but there was an article in the New York Times that was called "What Happens When You're Disabled But Nobody Can Tell."
Right.
And it was written by Andrew Solomon, and it just resonated with me a lot, because there's a lot going on for us if we don't have the ability to do something. And like I mentioned, you can't tell by looking at me. So how would you know that today I'm having like a really horrible day because I don't have a sense of smell, and like I'm anxious because I'm worried that my clothes smell or my food in the office fridge stinks, or, you know, X, Y, and Z. So I just, that article was really cool. So I would recommend anybody who's interested to go check it out. It's again, What Happens When You're Disabled But Nobody Can Tell by Andrew Solomon.
I really appreciated that article because it was sort of a take on this invisibility, this idea that I hadn't really read somebody who thought about it so much before.
Mm-hmm.
And that's exactly what we've all got going on, whether we really identify as being disabled or not. It's our reality in
Right.
the, you know, olfactory disorder space.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Yeah.
this Andrew Solomon who wrote that article, he's not the person who started the Invisible Disabilities Association?
You know, I'm not sure.
Oh, okay. I just thought, wow, that's interesting. They both crossed your path.
Yeah, I don't, he's a journalist. I don't know. I don't actually know if he started that other group. Yeah, they just both kind of came across my path.
Neat.
But maybe he did, but I don't think that they're connected.
Well, I'm sure you'll keep us posted as you investigate more into this association.
Yeah. I'm definitely following them now, so looking forward to learning more about them.
Great. What would you like people without anosmia to know about what it's like having anosmia?
This is also, I love all my questions, I guess. But this is another good one. I think what I would like people to know is that there are a lot of little sadnesses, like every time that something happens related to smell, because I can't participate in that world anymore. So overall, I'm happy in my life, but it can be hard to be reminded of my loss when smell comes up. And I guess that the request would be that for those without anosmia, to just understand that it's so much more than just not being able to smell things. There's a lot of emotions that happen, and I think my resilience levels now are really high. I'm used to it. It's been over 10 years at this point, but every once in a while I'll get really caught off guard in a moment where it's just like really sad. So I guess just to understand that it's about more than just not having a sense of smell, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that really hit me when you said it's a lot of little sadnesses.
Mm-hmm.
I can relate to that.
Yeah, like an example, like pulling out clean clothes from the dryer, and I can remember growing up just like burying your face in that and like the clean laundry smell.
Mm-hmm.
Like that happened to me a few months ago and I just cried. Like
Right.
because it's not there anymore, and so like I'm fine. My day is okay, but just like that, there's just this like bam out of nowhere where it's just like, oh, that's sad. So
It is
I guess
sad.
just to understand that it can be really sad for people sometimes. Even if you're like healthy and happy and everything like that, it can still just be upsetting at times.
Yeah. I think your listeners can relate.
Yeah, I agree.
If you could have a sense of smell again, would you want one?
I would, but I think there's a condition to this. I would want it to work perfectly. Like if I had a sense of smell that didn't function well, or if I had to experience parosmia, I would not want that. I'm okay without it. I've interviewed a few people who've experienced parosmia and it just sounds horrific, and I've never had that experience, thankfully. So I wouldn't want it back if it meant that. But if I could have a functioning sense of smell again, I think that would be beautiful. I think that would be overwhelming. Definitely. I think it would take some time to like get used to it again, and would be maybe scary even to understand like what was happening to me again. I think my brain would be like, what is going on? But yeah, I
It'd be
would.
such a roller coaster.
Yeah.
You know, those familiar smells, you'd probably be so excited about re-experiencing. But
Yeah.
then it just crossed my mind that, like, you have no idea what your husband smells like. And to smell him for the first time, you'd be like, what?
Exactly. Yeah, I've shared that. Like we met after
Yeah,
anosmia, so I have no idea.
right.
What if I didn't like how he smells, you know? I don't know.
Such
I
an
don't know.
interesting question.
I would have to get used to him.
Yes. that I'm fascinated by the fact that in all your years of anosmia, because you've experienced more than 10 years, you've never had any bouts of parosmia. And I know there's so little research, in this whole olfactory disorder space, but I really wonder, how many anosmics don't ever experience parosmia? How many people who experience parosmia recover? Or, there's still so many questions.
Yeah, I agree. And can you remind me, did you experience parosmia?
I haven't really, certainly not the terrible smells. I've had a few very short bouts of like one cigarette smoke.
Right.
And then I had a few days where I kept thinking everything smelled like a bakery, which was not unpleasant.
Right.
But that's not hardly anything really, like not real parosmia, I don't think.
Yeah, there's, like I've mentioned a few guests on who it just sounds so horrible. Like I can't imagine. I have had like very, very rarely like the sense that I might be smelling something, but I don't know what it is. I can't explain what it smells like or where it's coming from, and that happens very rarely for me. But sometimes it's like outside in a certain spot, like by where we live. But I would say maybe like less than 10 times within the whole 10 years have I had something like that where I'm like, am I smelling something?
Right.
There's something going on in my nose and I don't know what it is.
But it's vague, it doesn't last long, and you can't identify. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
2 weeks ago, I had this sensation for like most of a day that I had like the residual taste of Chinese food in my mouth.
Oh, that's
And I don't
interesting.
know what the taste was. I don't know when was the last time I ate Chinese food, or like what it is that I'm thinking reminds me of Chinese food. Like it was all very vague, and I couldn't quite reach for it. I couldn't tell what it was, and then it went away. But stuff like that happens to me sometimes.
Yeah, I remember like growing up, we had cats, so there'd be times where like you're on cat box duty, like the litter box duty. You have to clean it, and so there would be times when I was young where you get like the stink of like the cat box pee in your nose, and it would like stick around for a while.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like I don't know, people who have parosmia, they get like things like stuck up there like that, and that's the best thing that I can like relate it to.
Right.
Yeah, is like when that would happen to me when I was younger, and it's not pleasant because it's distracting.
Right.
Yeah. Hey, thanks for listening to the Smell Podcast on YouTube. Make sure that you connect with the podcast on social media. You can find me online at thesmellpodcast.com or on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at The Smell Podcast. Can't wait to see you there.
Well, now let's transition to asking some questions that you've received over social media from some of your listeners.
Perfect.
How does that sound?
Sounds good.
Okay. So the first question, and I think you know how to pronounce this woman's name.
Frauke.
Frauke Gallia.
Mm-hmm.
She's from Falk Aromatherapy. She lives in California, and I know you've interviewed her on the Small Podcast before.
Yep.
She asked the question, how do you and your husband interact with each other in regards to your anosmia? Meaning, how do you two interact as it relates to smelling? In a sense, does he support you? Like, some people have called it like, is he your designated nose? Or how do other smellers in your immediate circle navigate around your anosmia?
So this is a really good question, and I actually talked to him about it, so I have his feedback too. But basically, Steven helps me smell things all the time, especially like food and laundry. I don't mind doing laundry, but I struggle to put it away right away, so I usually will ask him if something smells fresh enough to wear if I'm not sure.
Right.
I've mentioned that I like to jog, so sometimes I'll ask him after I come back if I stink, and he tells me that I smell sweaty, but that I don't smell bad. So, I guess that's comforting to know. And I don't want people to be like, oh, that's gross. Like, why wouldn't you shower? So I will shower after I jog, but I think it's more of a personal curiosity thing for me to know if I stink or not after I've gone and exercised, since I can't smell myself. But I played sports all throughout growing up. So I remember what it means to smell sweaty, but not have body odor, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So I think when I ask him, I'm trying to like reconnect with myself in a way that I can't anymore since I can't smell. And he doesn't, I don't think he minds. He does it for me. He also will support me by reminding me and asking me about smell training.
Ah.
So I've shared before that I really struggle with that, to stick it out, and he helps me by bringing it up, which is not always appreciated by me, but I think it's a good thing that he asks me. Like, he continues to push me when I don't want to do it.
Yeah.
He's also there to like support me if I get like sad or frustrated about not having a sense of smell. So I'll randomly ask him to tell me how something smells, and he will do his best to do it. I think in general that we have a really difficult time explaining how something smells in our language.
Yeah, Stephen's
Unless,
not alone in that.
yeah, so that applies to everybody. But I think unless you're like a professional perfumer, we have a terrible vocabulary for describing smells.
Right.
Like, what does the lemon smell like? Citrusy. They're related to each other, you know what I mean? So it's difficult to describe it. And then in regards to like other people in my world, another person that stands out a lot is my mom. So
Ah.
after I lost my sense of smell, she has started to describe things to me without me asking her. So she's still back in Idaho, and since I'm here in New Jersey, we don't get to spend as much time together as we used to. But she'll describe like how the room smells, or like when we walk into a restaurant, like if it smells like salsa or like beef cooking or whatever. So to me, that's just like a really beautiful gesture, and I don't know if she realizes that she does that
Hmm.
or not, but she has started doing that for a few years now, and it's just really, I don't know, it's just a really kind thing to do.
Yeah, I really appreciate it when folks do that for me as well, because I feel like I can be included in the experience that they're having, or I'm part of the world
Mm-hmm.
that's around me that I'm not clued into. But when they tell me, when they explain it to me, then I can sort of translate it. I can sort of, I can remember, thankfully I was
Yeah,
acquired anosmic. Yeah.
it's just really nice, like, to be included, like you're saying, and to feel like, because you walk into a restaurant, and you see the food and you see the line and you see the tables and the chairs and the soda machine and all that stuff, but you're not getting like that, like, oh my gosh, I'm about to eat a burrito, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like, you go up and you see the food, so then like you can get the cues that way. But there's like that visceral moment of walking into, like, I'm thinking specifically in my head of, there's this restaurant in Boise called Cafe Rio, which is just delicious. It's like this
Mm.
Mexican food. So like, if when you walk into Cafe Rio, most people have like this visceral reaction of like, oh my gosh, I'm about to like get down on some good food, you know? And for me, it's not there anymore. So I don't know, just those kinds of things where it's like, oh, it smells spicy in here today. Like, it seems like they have jalapenos or something. So you're like, yeah, I can remember what that was like.
Right.
So yeah, those are the two people that like stand out to me in terms of being very supportive.
Mm-hmm. I'm glad you have them.
Thank you. Me too.
The next listener question is also about food. It looks like maybe it's from somebody on Twitter at
Yeah.
yeah, at JoanG8791 from Manchester, England. They asked,
I think she might have been on Instagram, but yeah, that was her handle.
oh, okay, Instagram, pardon me, JoanG8791. The question is, can you taste things or do you rely on texture?
Yeah. So this was a good question too. I think we've talked about it a little bit already, but just to like
Mm-hmm.
re-elaborate, I can taste the basic tastes. So salty, sweet, bitter, sour, umami. I don't think that I can differentiate flavors anymore.
Right.
And I mentioned earlier that I do rely quite a lot on textures. So salad is very bleh. But if you add like sunflower seeds, carrots, other crunchy things on it, it gets a lot more enjoyable for me. And I know that I've spoken with other people who have anosmia, and they say that they get a lot of comfort from creating dishes that have a lot of colors.
Mm.
But to me, that doesn't really do very much for me. But I really do like to mix up the textures as much as possible and add things that make it better. I don't know if I've ever talked about, but like I think I have, but like Ben and Jerry's ice cream.
Right.
I think like Ben Cohen, the co-founder of Ben and Jerry's, he also has anosmia, and that's why Ben and Jerry's has so many textures in it. So it's like the perfect ice cream for people who have anosmia, right? Because it speaks to that need for something more than just like the flavor.
Exactly. I know you said you don't really like the smooth and creamy so much, but the smooth and creamy ice cream with the chunks of chocolate or the nuts or whatever, like that
Exactly.
makes it worthwhile.
That's a completely different experience, right? Like, so that's
Right.
why I love Ben and Jerry's ice cream specifically. And he has anosmia, so that's why it's so great.
I'm glad for people like us.
Yep.
The next question is from, again, it could be Instagram or Twitter. You probably know.
I think they're all from Instagram, yeah.
All Instagram. Okay, so the
Yep.
Instagram handle is Vasquez Ignacio, but I might be saying that wrong because I don't have a degree in Spanish.
No, you got it.
Okay. This is an emotional question. How was the process of adapting as well as struggling to recover your sense, like in the first year, I suppose? And then how do you feel now, and have you adapted? Do you sometimes feel sad about this?
I thought this was a good question too. So the first year of having anosmia was really sad for me. It was during a time when there weren't very many resources online, and no one in my immediate circle had heard about it or knew what it was. Like, Fifth Sense in the UK started in 2012. Absent started later than that. So a lot of these resources that we have available to us now they weren't there. So when you're going through something painful, to me, it feels like no one else cares or understands. And I think now that looking back, like my family and my friends cared, it was just that anosmia, if you haven't experienced it, isn't comprehensible. You can't
No, it's not.
you can't understand what it means unless you've experienced it. There's people who get really close to understanding, and they're like really invested in like how like what anosmia means, and they care about it, and they're researchers, or they have family members, or they're just like interested in it, and they can kind of get close to understanding it. But I think like unless you have experienced it specifically, that it's just really difficult to completely understand how horrible it can be. So I've done well, I think, adapting to having anosmia. And typically I don't get very sad about it on a day-to-day basis anymore, but I think that's just the passage of time. The grief is a lot less raw for me now than it was before. So every once in a while I'll get really sad, like I'll have a really bad day where I'm so bummed that I don't have a sense of smell anymore, or I might get angry. Like anger is a good emotion sometimes because I feel like it's not fair.
Right. It's
Um,
not.
and when those days happen, I just do my best to cope with it. So if this is new, because I know especially with COVID-19 and everything, there's a lot of people who are going through anosmia right now for the first time, and it's really scary. So I would recommend, if people are open to the idea, to try therapy. So that has helped me a lot in all aspects of my life, but specifically if I'm feeling upset about having anosmia. So I've done therapy for quite a few years now, whether it's in person or now like on the phone because of COVID. But I just think that it's really helpful. And I know not everyone is ready for that. So when you're ready, or if you're ready, I would encourage that. Another thing for coping, and I don't want to sound cliche about it, but I think exercising can genuinely help if you're feeling sad. So, again, if you're in a place where you can exercise, I would recommend trying that as well. I know not everyone is like ready to do that. So, when you get to a place where like you're ready to try it, I think that can help. There's this thing that I do, and I kind of want to share it with everyone. Is
Please.
So for me, like if I don't want to do something, right, whatever it is, but specifically with exercise, like if I don't want to go jogging, I just play a trick on myself where I say like, okay, we don't have to go jogging. We're not going to go jogging. We're just going to put on our jogging clothes. Um, and then I'll say to myself like, great, now you've got your clothes on, like let's put on your shoes. And then now that you've got your shoes on, like you might as well just go outside a little bit, and like let's walk around.
Just
Like
go outside.
we're not jogging. We're not doing this big scary thing. And then typically by like the time that I get outside and I start walking, it's going okay. So then I'm like pumped, or like I'm like, okay, I can do this. Like I'll decide to start jogging. And again, it kind of seems dumb, but it helps me so much. So if I start off thinking like I have to jog 3 miles today, I won't do it. There's no way.
Right.
But if I think that I'm just going to do it like one step and then the second step, and then all of a sudden I'm out there and I'm doing the thing that I didn't want to do. So breaking it down into like little pieces helps me a lot, because I'm not jogging 3 miles, right? I'm just putting on my shoes. Like, that's all.
Right. Just going to go outside for a bit.
Right. And then I think it's also being like okay with like, today's not my day. Like, I'm
Right.
not doing it. I'm not going to jog 3 miles today. Like, I'm not feeling it after half a mile. And like, that's okay too. I think people can get really mean to themselves sometimes.
Yeah, because I was
And
thinking what you're doing is so gentle. It's so like, loving of yourself.
right. And sometimes in my head, I'll be like, why? You should just do it. Just go do your 3 miles. And sometimes, like today, I jogged 2 miles before this interview, and I didn't want to do the second mile, and that's all right. Like, so I kind of did the same thing. Like, well, we're not really jogging our best, but we're still doing it. So my time was slow. It's whatever. Like, and that's okay. Like, the other day, my time was much better. So that's the other day. I don't know. So just be nice to yourself, I guess.
That makes a lot of sense on many levels. Be nice to
Yeah.
yourself. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
And break
really
it down.
appreciate, yeah. I think your advice about counseling and letting yourself feel your feelings and moving your body. I mean, that's as cliche as it may be or as typical as it may be, it applies. And sometimes we think, well, people don't understand anosmia. It's not the same, it's not the same as other grief or other loss. But I found that it is. It is unique, but it's still an experience of grief and loss. It's still like a
Mm-hmm.
mental health thing. It's an emotional thing. And so we deal
Yeah.
with it the same way we would deal with other emotional struggles.
Yeah. I have a lot of like mental self-talk when I'm doing things. And I think that's like definitely like therapy and just like learning my own like habits that I repeat. But for example, like a few months ago, I was doing yoga and I was like, oh, you're so slow and like you can't do the yoga pose and like you're so inflexible and you're like old and whatever. And then I like was, and then I kind of paused for a second and I was like, you're being really mean. Like,
Yeah.
you wouldn't say that to anyone else who was trying to do yoga right now. So, like, why don't you just calm down a little bit? And then it like helped, it made it a lot better because I was like, oh, that is right. Like, I would never talk to someone else like that. So, why do I
Yes,
think it's okay to talk to myself like that?
exactly. Katie's a lovely person. You would never talk to her that way.
Exactly. So then, like, I was like, all right, well, then I'm going to like shut that part up and we're going to like move on and do our best today because I'm not feeling down dog, but I'm going to do my best.
I think that's very helpful, Katie.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope that helps someone. So just be nice.
The next question is from somebody who goes on Instagram as Golden Gold Goldie,
Uh-huh.
which I think is a great handle.
Yeah.
The question is, could you speak about how we fundamentally are missing a part of the universe that everybody else is fully aware of? Should we feel that we are missing out, or do you think we compensate with our other senses?
So I think all of these are really good questions, but I liked this one a lot. And I think that the way that someone who has congenital anosmia versus acquired would answer this question is different.
Mm-hmm.
So if listeners aren't familiar with Lars Lundqvist's book, it's called A World Without Smells, then I would highly recommend that book.
Right.
Lars is congenitally anosmic, and he does a really good job of expressing how someone who's never had a sense of smell navigates the world and like how it can be really confusing for people to understand like what all these smelling people are talking about, right? Because to him, it doesn't exist. It never has existed.
Right.
So it doesn't make sense, but like he tries to understand it. So for myself, I think as an acquired anosmic, I definitely think that a huge part of my universe is missing because I had it beforehand.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that smells have been linked to memory and research, and I am convinced that that's true. I think that I have a bad memory for things that others seem to remember easily, and I think that it's gotten a lot worse since I've had anosmia. So for example, like there's no longer this ability for me to like walk into Bath and Body Works and smell a perfume and have it like transport me back to junior high, right? And the memories that I have that are linked to wearing cucumber melon perfume. Like there's this specific Bath and Body Works cucumber melon spray that my friends and I would just like lather it on when we were in junior high school. And so I can't have that anymore, right? I can't walk in and just smell that and be transported back to like those moments and those memories of when we were all together and we were wearing it. So I think it definitely that I'm missing a big piece of the universe in that way, the way that others who do have a sense of smell experience it. I do think that it's okay to feel like you're missing out on something because we are.
Mm-hmm.
And I never want to speak as the authority on how people with anosmia should feel. So like I'm one person and my experience is different from someone else's. So if you feel like you're missing out, then that's a valid experience of the world. And if you don't think that you're missing out, then that's valid too, right? So my goal with sharing everyone's stories and now with my own is that we all know that we're not alone, that there's other people who are going through something similar to us. And I think you even mentioned that earlier, like we can compare experiences.
Yeah.
And I just find that extremely comforting. And I think that others do too, just to share those stories. So also to address the other part of the question about compensating with other senses,
Mm-hmm.
I do think that my sense of hearing is fantastic. But I
Okay.
don't know if that's related to having anosmia. So like I just think I have a good sense of hearing, and I don't know. I would be interested to learn if it has increased or improved, but there's no way that I could know that, right?
Right.
But like when we had our apartment in Boise, we had like these dedicated parking spots like right in front of our house, and I could always hear when Steven was home based on like how his car door shut compared to others, like even inside our apartment. And so I just think I have like supersonic hearing maybe. But
You maybe
yeah,
do.
I just think, yeah, for that one, I would recommend like Lars's book to kind of get an idea of one person's view with congenital to answering that question. But I do think that we're missing a part of our universe.
I appreciate the reminder about Lara's book because I would like to read A World Without Smells. I forgot about that.
Yeah, it's a good book. It's definitely good. Because the way that we experience the world is completely different. And that's why I like talking to people who have congenital and people who have acquired. Because anosmia is rare, but congenital anosmia is even rarer.
Okay, the final question is from Dia Klein. And her handle on Instagram, I forget how she pronounces it, but I think it's, I forget.
SEO life.
SEO life. Thank you. Because isn't it a Hungarian word? Is that what it is from?
I think so. It means
Right.
like, you good?
That's right.
Yeah.
You good?
Uh-huh.
SEO life from Dia Klein. And her question is, quote, do all your guests get a super cool quote? I'm dying over here wondering if I said something that's quote worthy.
So what Dia's talking about, if people don't follow on social, on Instagram and Twitter, we post like guest quotes. And so, yes, that's the goal. I've had so many like fantastic guests over the 2 years. We're up to episodes in the 60s. So definitely, I hope to continue to share everybody's like cool quotes on social media moving forward. There's just a lot of episodes to go through, but definitely that's definitely the goal.
Great, Dia, you had a lot of cool quotes in your episode. I don't think you need to worry.
Right?
Yes. And I have an idea already what the cool quote is from this episode.
What do you think it would be?
To me, it really hit when you said, I'm going to get the words wrong now this time, but it's like a bunch of little sadnesses.
Yeah, there are a lot of little sadnesses every time that smell comes up.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't know if
Definitely.
it's cool, but that was impactful for me.
Yeah, I think resonates well.
Yeah.
So, well, thank you, Carrie.
I'm very glad to get to know your story more. And I think, Katie, that a lot of your listeners will be really enjoying this episode. And I really congratulate you for 2 years of the Smell podcast. It's been an amazing resource for myself and many others. And you have helped us. We care about you. And it's really good to just learn more about you and to feel more connected to you.
Thank you so much. I'm just sitting here like with a big smile on my face.
Lovely.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, it's like I said at the beginning, it genuinely is one of my favorite things to do. I have more people to interview and lists of names written down now of people who have reached out and said that they're interested than when I started. So there's no like fear of running out of stories to share. And I think it's just going to continue, to go pretty strong. So hopefully next year by this time, we'll be talking about like the 3-year anniversary episode.
Well, I am very much looking forward to that. And we can't wait to see what develops on the Smell podcast and all the lovely things that you are leading and learning and teaching us all about.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you all for listening to my story. I want to reiterate to you all how extremely grateful and happy I am that the podcast is now 2 years old. I can't believe how quickly time has gone. I plan to continue sharing our stories and interviewing people about the world of smell and taste. Thank you all for your support and kind words over the last 2 years. If you'd like to get in touch with me, you can email me at thesmellpodcast@gmail.com. You can follow the podcast on Twitter and Instagram at The Smell Podcast and visit online at thesmellpodcast.com. I'm always interested in sharing listener stories. Please rate, review, and subscribe to The Smell Podcast if you listen using iTunes. Reviews are helpful because they allow others to find the show. And finally, if you would like to financially support the podcast, you can do so by clicking on the link in the episode description. I really appreciate your support. And a huge shout out to everyone who currently contributes to the show because your generosity is what makes the podcast possible. Until next time, have a great day.